Welcome back to the Scale Builders Guild. Thanks again for watching. What are we doing today? I often get a lot of requests about what's going on with that, what's going on with that, where are these builds, why aren't you talking about them? Let's see some video on them. So today I'm doing the first in a monthly series I'm calling What's on the Bench. And today we're going to go through what's on the bench. I'm going to show you some of the details of some of the trucks that I'm working on, and of course there will be links in the description below where you can check out full build threads on the Scale Builders Guild forums. I'll also talk about a few other builds that I've seen on the forums lately and give you some links to those so you can check them out. I think this is going to be a really fun series and I look forward to showing you all the stuff that we have going on here. So let's dive right in. The first build that I'm going to show you today is a build that I'm doing on the Axial SCX-10-2 Raw Builders Kit. Now this looks like a Toyota, and yes, you're right, it is a Toyota, but it's not your typical Toyota. This is a Toyota Trekker. And what you're looking at on the back half here is a resin cast topper built by my very good friend and senior vice president in charge of Trekkers at the Scale Builders Guild, Richard, also known as Pardon My Noob. He built this a number of years ago, did a styrene original one, and then did some resin roto casting pops of that so he could give those to some of his friends. I'm one of those people, which is really cool. It's so nice to have this piece, and it's very rare. In fact, in the Toyota world, it is pretty rare as well. Originally, it was made by Winnebago, and it was sort of before the 4Runner came out, so it's a Hilux cab, and then they would graft this fiberglass rear end onto the truck. You could get it with a seat in the back, and it was basically what Toyota was going to make in 1984, but before that. I think it's a really cool example of the ingenuity of the aftermarket, and with that in mind, there are a lot of aftermarket pieces on this truck. The most notable one is the way in which this body mounts to the Axial chassis. One of the vendors on the Scale Builders Guild, Rex Racer, also known as Mod 19 on Shapeways, creates these mounts that are bolt right on to the SCX-10-2 chassis and give you perfect ride height and a nice flat skid. It's a really unique piece, and I will put a link in the description below where you can pick one up because it makes it so easy to put a Toyota Hilux or RC4 drive Mojave or any number of bodies in this format with this hole spacing directly onto an Axial chassis, and that alone is a game changer because it's always been sort of like, how do I get this mounted? This just takes away all that confusion. It's still pretty much not done. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of filler going on because resin is not the most smooth of all things to be casting in, but it does eventually, once it's all cleaned up, is going to look really cool. There is room up front for maybe a Night Customs engine bay cover, so we're going to investigate that as well. Overall, it's in decent shape so far, and I think it's going to be a really fun build once I get it all together. But this is just one of the ways in which you can use that Raw Builders kit from Axial. I wanted to make sure I was showing off something that wasn't off the shelf and definitely gave you a lot of customization all in one package. So I think this is going to be a really fun build, and I definitely need to get back on it because it's been sitting like this for a little while. One other quick thing. Those are Pardon My Noob inner fenders as well, and those are styrene vacuum formed, and I'll try to find a link to his eBay page if he's still offering those as well. So that's the Toyota Trekker. I'm hoping to get back on that one soon. I'd love to have it ready for the springtime. Next is this cute little guy. This was a UCX Barrage Gen 2 when I first got it, and obviously it's not that anymore. This is what's known as a Steyr-Puch Pinzgauer, and Pinzgauers are originally military trucks, and I painted this one up to look like a civilian head. Purchased it after its military service and built it to be sort of a camper. The good folks over at Horizon were kind enough to send myself, Pardon My Noob, and Wrencher, one of the other mods on the Scale Builders Guild, an UCX Barrage Gen 2 each, to try to make it a more custom project and to do things with it that people hadn't maybe seen before, just to give them the idea that there is lots of potential in this little chassis And this is one of the results. Richard built a mall crawler Jeep JK, and Wrencher built a Wrangler YJ. It's a very versatile chassis. You can do a lot with it. This is a scratch-built styrene body. I spent a few months putting this together. There are some 3D printed elements as well. I wanted to kind of give it a bit of both worlds just to show what's possible. Yeah, it started as a couple of flat sheets of white styrene and built it into what you see here. There's definitely a lot on the forum showing you how I made this body and the steps that went into it and all the little details that came along with it. And of course, I'll put a link down below where you can check that all out. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I really like the 70s inspired paint job. I saw one painted up like this on the web. I do a Google image search all the time, seeing what paint jobs people have done on their trucks to give me some inspiration. Overall, I'm very happy with the final look of it, and it's just nice to see something a little bit different on the UCX Barrage Gen 2 chassis. I'm really excited about this one. This is the JS Scale Range Rover Classic two-door body, and it's finally starting to take shape. It's been a long process, and there's a lot that you have to deal with when you live in sub-zero temperatures like I do half the year. And painting is one of those things that I have a lot of trouble with because I don't have a dedicated space indoors where I can do it. Especially when you're using automotive paint like I've been using a lot of lately. This sort of thing needs to wait until the temperatures are just right, and I did manage to borrow some time in a friend's garage. He was very gracious and allowed me to do some painting in there, and I very much appreciate it. So finally, the Range Rover Classic body is in paint. If you've been following along at all on the forum, you know that I've also did some denting on this body, and I did a technique where I heat the body up from the inside with a heat gun, and I use actual rocks to sort of scrape up against it to give it a realistic looking dent or scrape or bend in the plastic. It should look like real damage, and the best way to do that is this technique. The paint that I used is a actual matching automotive paint. This is a paint color for Range Rover. It's called Ardennes Metallic Green, and it was period correct for this body and this time, and I'm really happy with how the paint looks. The body is sitting on a GCM C-Max chassis with proper front radius arms and coils at all four corners, which is super cool. It's a really versatile chassis, and it's really great that I'm actually finally able to put it to good use. Because it's a GCM C-Max, there is the option for running a full 3D printed motor cover over the motor and transmission. Scale designed by MrCommaD has done some really great motors lately. I know he's working on one for the Range Rover Classic. I will definitely be putting that into this truck. There is no interior plans yet. Not really sure what I'm gonna do there. I think for the first little while, I'm just gonna focus on getting it built, and then we'll worry about the interior later. I may tint the windows so we don't even have to run an interior. It's not something I love doing, but for the sake of getting it done and getting outside, I might have to do that. I am referencing a full-size vehicle, and with that in mind, the full-size vehicle had a rooftop tent. So the rules state, in my own mind anyway, that I need to have a rooftop tent on this. Thankfully, Knight Customs has already started offering this print at home RTT. So this is a 3D printed rooftop tent that I printed thanks to James Knight of Knight Customs, and that's gonna go on top of the truck. We're gonna have to build a little roof rack for that, but that's gonna come later. Also, you'll notice that these are the 3-spoke Range Rover Classic specific wheels. I designed and 3D printed these myself, and they are also available on Shapeways. So if you want to check that out, I will put a link in the description below as well. Still a lot of detail work to be done, but I'm definitely on the right track, and I'm really, really excited about finishing this one. And finally, for this episode of What's on the Bench, here is the 5th gen 4Runner that I've been working on for I don't know how long. It's a labor of love, I will tell you that for sure. This body is from Manitou Lou, also known as MFab on Facebook. He 3D prints these bodies, and they come to you as a puzzle. You have to do a lot of assembly, there's a lot of gluing, there's a lot of tinkering and thinking it through, and there's a lot of finishing required in sanding and paint to make it look like it does here. There's still a lot of detail work that has to be done, but all those details and all the headlight buckets and all of those things are included. It's a really fantastic setup, and if you have the patience and the time, I definitely recommend picking one of these up if you're looking for a 5th gen 4Runner. It is a 12.3 inch wheelbase, so you can put it on nearly any chassis, but I opted to do something a little bit outside of the box and put it on that new RC four-wheel drive JD Models Hero truck. Now you're thinking that was an F-150 Raptor clone, and you'd be right, it was. And it was also a much longer wheelbase than I'm showing here. The chassis has been chopped and reconnected. I've built a series of 3D mounts to hold the body to that chassis, and it's still very much a work in progress. I'd like to 5-link the rear as a standard 5th gen 4Runner is. We're gonna have to see how far I get into it and how specific and accurate I want this to be. The reason I chose this chassis was that it had the independent front suspension, and I really like the look of it. I'm also converting the drivetrain to a GCM forward motor mount and transmission, so I can have an actual motor in this truck as well. It's a work in progress, something I'd like to have done in the next few months, and I think if I buckle down and actually do it, I can get it done. Especially if I'm not distracted by the hang time challenge that I'm currently working on with Josh from Harley Designs. One other build that I did want to talk about that isn't mine is Pardon My Noob's bobbed 4Runner that he did for the RC four-wheel drive giveaway. This is an awesome truck. It's got a lot of great detail. Richard did an amazing job of bobbing it, and if you're not familiar with bobbing, usually what happens in the full-size world is they will reduce the overall length or overhang in the rear by bobbing the truck, and bobbing means to section it out and put it back together. Bobbing a 4Runner, I've never seen it in real life, but I presume it's been done. I know that it's been done to Land Cruisers and Hiluxes and all kinds of pickups in general, just to get that overall length reduced. It's a really cool looking truck. It's definitely aggressive, and whoever wins it is going to get a pretty awesome truck. Hopefully there's a link to where you can win this truck or how to win this truck. I'll try to put that in the description below as well. I think that's it for what's on the bench. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, if you like this video, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell so you can always get an update when new videos come out. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.